Welcome to the course, Learn Business Continuity from BCM Experts. I've been doing this for many, many years. I started off as the BCM head for American Express in its financial center in India. And per my understanding at that time, the Amex Financial Center used to be making about 70% of the global balance sheet was prepared in India. So you can understand why it was a priority operation, which needed business continuity. That's where I cut my teeth in BCM, did the CP course from DRI in Singapore, have been practicing BCM since, and it's been a pretty long journey. I would say covered over easily 10,000 plus people in various shapes and forms. But anyhow, let's quickly get on with the session. Overview. Ultimately, what we will do in this is really cover all stages of the life cycle. Essentially, that's the key idea of the whole process. About 6 sessions slotted for the 6 stages, approximately 2 hours per session. So we look to keep today's session certainly 2 hours. The next session, which is next week, about 1 week from now, has lesser content. Embedding doesn't actually have 2 hours content. We may slightly take the next module a little bit into that, and understanding the organization, session 3 actually has a lot of content. That's where we do the BI and the risk assessment. So in that sense, we'll try and see whether we can move some stuff up. So approximately 12 hours of content, that's the intention. Let's quickly move forward. 6 stages of the life cycle, understanding the BCM life cycle. And I've purposely chosen this approach. The very simple reason, to me, this actually makes it very simple to understand. Now, I was one of the first people who actually started assessing business continuity when the BS 25999 came out. That was way back in 2007. So it's been a long journey since then. When a new standard comes, there's a concept of technical expert. The logic being that the people who are auditing and assessing are experts at assessing. They are not necessarily experts at understanding the domain. So when a new standard comes, you have assessors who assess compliance, but importantly, you have someone who understands the standard and can help the assessment team understand and be sure that what is being suggested by the SSE is sensible and will work. That's the job of a technical expert. So I was probably the first technical expert outside the UK at that point in time, involved in 2 of the top 10 assessments in the world, Citigroup and Accenture. But then that standard got replaced by the 22301, and this diagram disappeared. And the 22301, many of you are familiar, and I'll show you the clauses also shortly, uses a very different approach where it looks at the building blocks. So actually this depth of understanding disappears, or I wouldn't say disappears, maybe it's not all that clear. One has to strive to find it somewhat. So I prefer to use this diagram. And at least if there's nothing you take away from today, if you can take away these 6 stages, at least I would say that's still a time worth spent for me and for you. Stage 1, program management. That's what we're going to spend time on today, setting up the program. And I liken this to a chef starting to prepare for a big event. And he doesn't just, supposing there's a big marriage reception or there's an anniversary or something like that. It's not that, and let's say the anniversary is 1 month from today. So about the 19th of March, let's say. It's not that the chef wakes up on the 19th morning and miraculously everything goes well. It involves a lot of planning, a lot of readiness, a lot of allocation of roles and responsibilities, who's going to do what, keep ready the resources, agree the menu, agree the theme. And that's just the chef. Think about the event planner. So the event planner is not just figuring out the food, you're figuring out the decor, you're figuring out the music, the guest list, who's sitting with whom, the layout, the buffet, a whole bunch of things to be done. So you don't just start off on that morning and get going. It involves a pretty major stage of planning and readiness. So I use that example perfectly for business continuity. You can't just jump into a program and expect that magically everything will start happening. It requires a lot of foresight, planning, roles and responsibilities, resources, literally everything that you would need to do in planning a party, or as I said, even the menu for that party. All of those activities are perfectly mapped in business continuity program management. So that's why it's a critical stage. It's stage 1. You don't get this stage right, you've got a lousy party, you've got a failed event. And that's what happens when you don't plan BCM program management well. You have a failed program. So pretty critical to have this as the first step. Now, let's say you've done this step well. You've got something really good and solid in place. It works. Fantastic. Good position to be in. What next? Can you just start off and launch? And again, things will go perfectly as planned? Or is there a lot you need to do? I noticed 14 questions in the chat. Thanks so much. I hope they're questions and I'll deal with them a bit later. And a quick point to everyone that sessions 2 to 6 will actually be not advertised but communicated to you via YouTube. And we'll go live and the link will come to you. So my request, please do subscribe. Everyone who's subscribed will get the link. If you're not subscribed, you actually won't get the link. So please do press the subscribe button. So at least we are sure that the information will come to you directly. Okay, back to the life cycle. So let's say you've got program management well under control. Great, good thing to be in, good starting point. Hopefully you'll be successful. Do we just start rolling out the program and everything will get perfectly, or do you need to give people some advance notice, some heads up, some understanding of what the way ahead is, some planning from their side? So you just tell them, oh, by the way, we need you 3 days today, start for the BIA. If you did that, there's a good chance they won't turn up. They're already busy elsewhere. Their boss will not release them. They don't know the background, the context. And yes, I mean, some may turn up, some may not, but there's a good chance things will not be effective. You won't achieve your objectives. So typically the next stage of program management is what's known as embedding. Embedding is really ensuring that everyone understands what's important, understands the key priorities, understands the need for this whole initiative, understands why we are spending time on BCM. Honestly, I would say in today's day and age, you can't beat me on the head and expect me to follow you with my heart. I may follow you on the face of it. I may pretend to follow you, but am I really doing my best? Probably not. Just because you told me is not good enough. But if you do much more, if I'm convinced that this makes sense, then there's a good chance that I'm going to give it my best. So in embedding, we try and make sure that everyone understands why this is an important initiative, why they should spend their time. Now, I'm actually, for the sake of going forward, just going to shut off the video. I will periodically keep putting it on, and also to save bandwidth a little bit. So I'll keep talking anyhow. Embedding, what do we do in embedding? We try and make sure that everyone understands why this is an important initiative, why this is a good thing to do, why they must support it. Now, if I believe that this is good and important, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to give it my heart and soul and going to do my very best. And there's a good chance that if I'm not convinced, so I would say the next step is to make sure that everyone involved who has a role to play in the program understands why this is important. And if that penny drops in my mind, then whether or not you tell me, I'll still give it my full best attempts because I believe this is a good thing to do and I need to do it. And if I'm not convinced, I'm just going to do it as we call lip service, just to make you happy, but not doing my best. And then what's the point? So critically, it's embedding is taken as the next step so that everyone is willing to support it. And a question which we'll come to next in module 2 in detail is only people who have to play a role need to understand, or people who don't have a role need to understand? And my quick answer would be everyone, even if you don't have a role to play, still it's good for you to know that this is a good thing to do. And it's good for you to appreciate why we are spending this time and effort. Because in the off chance that there is something to be done, at least you're going to be mentally receptive. Otherwise, if something needs to be done, then you're going to need to be convinced before you're willing to spend time or understand the big picture. So in embedding, we try and make sure that not just those who have a role to play understand and have full awareness, and even those who do not have a role to play. So it's a good next step to be sure that the environment is created. And if the environment is created, then there's a good chance everyone will support. If I go back to the example of the party we're planning, yes, party is being planned. Let everyone know that there's a party. At least you're aware. You don't need to do anything for the party, but you at least know a party is happening. And therefore, if that issue crops up and there is something to be done, at least you know the background. So embedding 2, pretty critical. Let everyone know, be aware. And importantly, I would also say budget the time. So if I need you, so let's say we spoke, say 18th of March, this party is happening for the sake of argument, using a different example. Do I need you? Okay, let's assume I need you from 10 to 12. So you should have in your diary now itself that I need you from 10 to 12 on the 18th of March, as the case may be. So in embedding, good to understand this is important. Good to understand that you need to play a role. Good to understand what your role is that you'll need to play. And good to understand when you need to play that role. So at least you can get it into your diary. Plan around it. What should not happen is I need you for the project and you're not available because you're committed elsewhere. Now, that's not great. So that's what we try and do in embedding. Next, understanding the organization. Now I'll go a bit fast because we'll cover all of these in detail later. But understanding the organization, this is where we do those famous steps, the BI and the risk assessment. I think most of you who know BCM would have heard about those steps before. Sometimes they are called the heart of business continuity. So that's done in understanding the organization. And the simple point is you need to understand what is good BCM for that organization. Sometimes I use an example with when I do my training or my consulting, and I say let's say I've done BCM for a bank before, and we've implemented business continuity consulting for about 10 banks, including I'm a banker myself. So can I say that I did bank X last month and now bank Y will be exactly the same? And therefore, I don't need to understand what makes you tick as an organization. Honestly, I can't. Each organization, even if it's in the same industry, will have their own prerogatives. And I'll give you an example, which is an example I often quote. So let's take a retail bank. Now, a retail bank, by definition, say the national bank, the state bank, most countries have the national bank. It's the bank that the government promoted to actually embed banking across the organization. It's probably the largest, it's probably the oldest. It has branches literally everywhere. Now, I know one bank in India. It has a great slogan. That's why I'm quoting that. Otherwise, I could quote any other bank from any other country. But this bank has a slogan called Banker to Every Indian. Now, that's their goal. They are saying each and every Indian is my customer. And if you know India, there are a lot of us. So that's their slogan. Take another bank in the same country, which is, say, Citi. I worked for Citi in the past. It's an American bank. Now, why did Citi open up in India about 100 years earlier? I assume, I wasn't there, so I've not asked anyone, but I assume Citi opened up because customers in America would say, look, we are dealing in India, so we would like to deal with you in India, so please open a branch there. Very fair request. In which case, what's Citi's target segment? Citi's target segment is typically I started off as a US corporate who has operations in India. So I should deal with you on both sides. Very simple, reasonable expectation. And I suspect that's what happened because, as many would know, Citi was a big retail bank in India, but they're selling off retail in India. And they're going back to saying we want to be a corporate bank only, by and large. And back to the same philosophy, stick to the knitting. Why did we set up? We set up to service our global customers in India, and that's what we should continue to do. Now, will these two banks have exactly the same BCM? No way. One says I'm retail, each and every citizen in the country is my customer. The other says no, my home country customers are the ones that I really want to service. And let's throw a third variation here. Let's take a Swiss bank. What are Swiss banks known for typically, historically? Private banking, wealth management, secrecy. So let's say a Swiss bank is operating in the same country. Would they have exactly the same initiatives, prerogatives? Would their BCM need to be exactly the same? No. Again, their target segment is very different. So just to expand this example, I've taken 3 examples from banking. All of them, I'm sure, have different expectations, different goals, different targets, different customers. And almost certainly you need to go through step 3, understanding the organization. Otherwise, there's no way you'll be able to do justice to what they need in the BCM. So this is a pretty critical step. We will, in these 12 hours, spend quite some time on this step and walk you through a BI and a risk assessment. At the end of stage 3, you would say, yes, I have a pretty good understanding of what the organization, what's important to the organization. I have an understanding of what could create a disruption for the organization. And I have a pretty good understanding that if that disruption does happen, then which product service activities need to be brought up and in what timeline. So that's really the takeaway from step 3. Let's say, great, I have an understanding of what's needed, but what next? I mean, let me package that into a solution. Let me look at potential solutions. Ideally, let me look at multiple solutions and select the most appropriate solution. So that's what we do in determine BCM strategy. In fact, the ISO 22301 calls this strategies and solutions. So strategy is kind of high level. It's conceptual. Solutions are slightly more on the ground, more operational, more real, more doable, practical. So at the end of step 4, you would say, look, I have agreed with my organization, with management. We are all on the same page of how we will restore our operations within the reasonable timelines and how we will try and prevent the disruptions from happening in the first place. So prevention is better than cure. And at the end of stage 4, we are saying we have agreed what to do. Great, it's good to agree what to do, but things will not happen till you make them happen. So stage 5, let's make sure that those things happen. Let's implement those solutions. Let's implement our responses. Let's create our plans. So at least if something goes wrong, we know what to do. We can ideally very quickly react to the incident. And if we react really fast, maybe we don't need to implement business continuity. Maybe we solve the problem there and then. So for example, if a fire breaks out, we are super quick in our response. We snuff off the fire literally almost instantly in a few minutes, maybe. Fantastic response. The fire doesn't spread. Great. I mean, we have some disruption while we are dealing with the incident, say about half an hour or an hour. But after that, we can reasonably restart, and we may have some assets that are damaged due to the fire and some shock and some trauma and some little bit of chaos to be managed. But other than that, there may not be a huge showstopper to restart. So in stage 5, we try to do 2 things. We try and ensure that we have good incident management. So if an incident breaks out, we can very quickly deal with it and manage with it. And we try and have at least clarity on what's required from a recovery point of view. So at least if we need to restart operations, be able to restart them within timelines, and therefore make sure that we don't take advantage of our stakeholders in terms of I would say inappropriate downtime. Certainly we have some downtime, but our attempt is to make sure that within reasonable timelines, without stretching the patience of our entities for whom we really care. We call them interested parties in the 22301, historically called stakeholders. Without taking advantage of the decency and the patience, we restart in reasonable periods of time. So they are certainly inconvenienced, but they're not inconvenienced to an unreasonable extent. And to that extent, once it's done, it's in the past, and hopefully they even forget that it even happened. And importantly, they don't hold it against us. They forgive us. Hopefully they said we did a great job in responding. And that's what business continuity is all about. The things will go wrong, but at least we have an obligation to deal with them fast, professionally, in a manner where we don't inconvenience the end user or our other stakeholders beyond the point. And then very quickly, hopefully, we can put the event behind us and move on as if nothing happened again. But last, it's great to build a response, but how do we know that response will work? So clearly exercise it, practice it, test it, do it a few times, maintain it, ensure that it stays current, it stays up to date, and keep reviewing it, what needs to be done. And here I have actually added my different variants. So when I advertise these 6 courses, I've added the word improvement. I do think that the word improvement should be part of this cycle. Mostly these words come from the BS 25999 standard. And I believe I am allowed to use it because this standard is technically withdrawn. It doesn't exist anymore, therefore. So I think it's kind of nothing wrong in using this diagram. I think this diagram really very nicely embeds in people's minds. And therefore, my request to you, if there's nothing else you take away, at least take away these 6 stages in your mind. And that itself means that if someone asks you about business continuity, you're able to then, in a very quick manner, at least give them a very high level understanding of how the stages are broken up and what the key objective is. Great. I'm going to take a short pause for now, just quickly looking at the questions in case there's anything immediate to address, if it's about the overall approach. And if not, then we'll jump into today's agenda, which is primarily stage 1, program management. So just give me a sec, please. Okay, thank you. So I think so far so good. No major comments that need answering at this point in time is the sense I have. Please do send in your comment as and when a question arises. As I said, best effort basis, I'll try and handle it towards the end. I'll periodically keep breaking. So let's go into stage 1. Now quickly, I just want to show you a mapping of the 6 stages. So on the left, we have the 6 life cycle stages that I just spoke about, by and large directly from the BS 25999. In the center, I have the 6 stages from the BCI life cycle. Now, what you will notice is they map perfectly. In fact, some wordings are also very much the same. I think the BCI has a nice, very simple approach, but sometimes the approach may not always make sense in terms of what you're trying to say. Policy program management, quite clear. Embedding, yes. I mean, people who understand what embedding will appreciate what's being done in stage 2. Analysis, kind of high level. What are you analyzing? What are the takeaways? So, but still a good short word. So if you want to keep things short, I think the BCI has a really good approach. Design, what are you designing? You're designing strategies and solutions. Implementing those solutions, so creating plans, which we call response typically. And importantly, validation, that we are sure it will work. So interesting, this maps almost perfectly. And as you notice, I'm using courseware developed by FQA. FQA is a UK-based entity who provides management services, education, and certification essentially. So they don't provide courses themselves. They are kind of the conscience keeper. Their partners provide courses, somewhat like other entities, somewhat like PCB or the BCI, etc. And critically, FQA manages the quality control. So we are using FQA course material out here. And quite a few people actually have gone through the FQA course and being able to, since it's perfectly mapped, all 6 modules to the BCI, have actually used the FQA course and then attempted the CBCI exam and done pretty well. In fact, I believe that approximately more than 50% have passed with merit. That's more than 85%. More than 100 people have taken the program, the CBCI exam after the FQA course. And generally, it seems they do quite well. So if someone's interested separately, other than this session today, do write to my team and they can put you in touch. How this maps to the ISO 22301 is in the last clause. So as I mentioned, the ISO 22301 takes an approach of actually looking at the building blocks. So that's program management. That's exactly what we do in program management. What is required to build the program? So the building blocks 4 to 7. Clause 7.3 is awareness. Awareness is kind of similar to embedding. In order to really commit and support it with my heart and soul, you need to make it clear to me why it's important. So certainly give me the awareness and the understanding. And then I will say, yes, I fully agree. This is important and you can rely on me. I won't let you down. If you need something from me, I'll do my best. So that's clause 7.3. Clause 8 in the ISO 2230 is operation. Operation is certainly where we do the BI risk assessment, but the full implementation of the life cycle is actually done in clause 8 from a 22301 point of view. So that's BI and RA practice 3, strategies and solutions practice 4, developing plans, incident plans, response plans practice 5. Even crisis management plans, and we may not delve into that too much here for now, but that's again a variation. Typically, the senior management plan is the crisis management plan. And lastly, once that's done, clause 9 and 10 in the ISO 22301 are actually performance management, putting in place the metrics, monitoring, maintaining, and clause 10 really continuous improvement. So that's how it maps. So I think the circle that we've used quite well maps to other methodologies. Certainly it will also map to the DRI 10 practices in some shape and form. We haven't done it here. We could at some stage. So I guess the point I'm really making is the way FQA has designed this course. I think it's quite generic. It provides the building blocks. And depending on the house you're looking to build, you can look at those 6 building blocks in any shape and form. I'll again pause here for a moment in case there are any questions. So hit me on the chat with any questions if you like. I'll try and handle it and then we'll jump into clause 1, stage 1 really. And also if there's any feedback about what you've done so far. This is the first time we're running this course as a live free session, total 12 hours across all 6 modules. So we are experimenting. I can't say I'm confident that everything will go 100% well. Hopefully it will. So if you have any feedback to give us now, do so, and I'll try the best to incorporate it. So just give me a sec, please, while I check the chat line. So Gaurav, you have a question about the order of the BI and the risk assessment. Great question. My only comment to you is probably 1 million people have asked this before, but it's a very valid question. As a matter of principle, I won't answer it now. I will answer it in stage 3, but it's a great question. Hold your thought, and I hope you'll be there when we actually cover it in the 3rd step, understanding the organization, which will be about 2 weeks from now. So Neeraj, again, you're talking about stage 3. So if you don't mind, again, I'm going to ignore the question for now. We'll deal with it in stage 3. Any questions about the overview and the overall approach? Any questions about program management? Hit me now, and otherwise we'll get more deeper into program management. So Rajesh, thanks. Embedding, let's come to it when we look at the next module. And therefore, I think no questions for now in terms of what we've covered. So let's keep going forward. Thank you. A bit of my background, maybe this should have come earlier, but doing BCM for a long time, written a book on BCM, writing another one at this point in time, and probably a 3rd one. So I think during this year, I will have 2 more books on BCM out, if all goes well. And as an organization, that's the bread and butter of what we do. We are a multiple award winner, awarded by the BCM multiple times in the BCM Hall of Fame in the UK. And we are, I would say, largely Middle East centric and India. That's what we do. But I'm going fast here because that's not the key objective of today. The key objective is not to publicize what we do, but to actually cover the course itself. So here we go. So policy and program management. Again, 6 aspects coming up by chance. The good thing is it's not that each module has 6 different steps to remember, but certainly module 1 does. So what do we do in program management? As we see here, we put in place all the needed approvals. And I'm saying organization. Nice to say, yes, the organization puts it in place, but who's the one who makes it happen? The poor BCM head. So any of you who've been BCM heads know that ultimately everything comes and rests with you, sadly. There's a customer of mine in Saudi, and he jokes that till we didn't have a BCM department, everyone did everything themselves. Now that we have a dedicated BCM unit, and the Saudi standard by the central bank, the SAMA, minimum business continuity objectives, which is, I would say, kind of at this point in time, that's probably the major regulation on business continuity in Saudi. So that's why I refer to it as Saudi standard. It's the best that they have for now. And it's very good, very detailed. The Saudi standard actually requests and it's for banks, of course, because it's by the central bank, banks and insurance companies. They actually request that there should be a dedicated department for business continuity. So this customer of mine jokes, he's the BCM head, and he says, till we didn't have a BCM team, everyone did their own work. Now that we have a BCM team, even if a light bulb has to be replaced, they say, oh, disruption in light services, business continuity, please kind of come and do what you need to do. So I think that's on the lighter side, but sadly, ultimately, everything comes and rests on the broad shoulders of the BCM head, be it male or female. I hope you have broad shoulders because everyone comes and dumps this stuff on you, sadly. And critically, we handle that in embedding as to what we can do to actually make sure that the organization spreads the load. And the organization makes sure that everyone should be following their role and responsibility, because it's really not fair to expect the BCM head to do everything for everyone. But critically, program management, the stage 1 is the BCM head responsibility. Ideally, in the other stages, you should be coordinating. You should be looking at the control panel. Someone else should step up to the table for whom it's a core responsibility. So it's teamwork. But I think in stage 1, it's really the BCM head driving this along with the sponsor and getting approvals of the steering committee, etc. So the organization, I would say, where with the BCM head front-ending, puts in place all the needed approvals. Whose approval do you need? Sometimes it's even a board decision. Sometimes, and again, the Saudi standard is a good example. They say that the board needs to manage the BCM program. In many organizations, the board just needs to know that the BCM program is in place. That's good enough. They don't really need the details. In many organizations, the board doesn't care. And I think less and less, I think the pandemic made it very, very clear why business counting is important. In general, I can make a statement that those who had BCM reacted much faster, quicker, more effectively, more smoother, less chaos. And those who didn't, I would say, struggled much more. That's a generalization I'm making, but I'm making that generalization. So certainly it adds value. So at least in this stage, we try and make sure that whoever's approval is needed approves, understands, supports, has given their opinion, their suggestions. Those opinions and suggestions have been considered to the best of your ability. They've allocated the resources, not just lip service at a very high level, yeah, we'll do this for you, but at a very detailed level. Sending out messages, nominating people. I have a customer, one of our first consulting organizations for a manufacturing entity, was an electronics manufacturer of Japanese origin. They actually sent out a formal letter to each of the coordinators. So they issued a formal letter in the name of the CEO. The CEO sent it out. There was a small ceremony. Those coordinators were called and handed over that formal letter signed by the CEO to say, you're one of our best. We think very highly of you. You have a great future with us. And for this project, we've selected our best people and therefore we select you. So hope you recognize the honor and hope you'll do your best for the project. So unfortunately, often in business continuity, you get given the person who is free and who has bandwidth. And why is he free and bandwidth? That's because no one else wants him. He's a troublemaker. He's kind of non-cooperative. Maybe he's not highly competent. So often when it comes to that, who's free? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, great. Let's assign him to BCM. That's really because they don't understand the importance of the project. So when we do our consulting, we normally say, we need your best people. And we try and give them a profile of what makes a good business continuity coordinator. So that's an example of the approval you need. You don't just need, yes, we will nominate coordinators, but you actually need the organization to fully support that you will put your best people and your most knowledgeable people and the people who can do the best job on this project by name. So once this phase is finished, stage one, all those people know that they've been assigned and all those people hopefully appreciate very soon why they've been assigned, partly in this, but even more in embedding. So by the end of embedding, they hopefully have a really good understanding what's expected. And they also are confirming their commitment and their desire and their willingness to fully play the role as expected. So by approvals, it's a much higher level, much more detailed level of approval where everyone is clear and therefore resources are fully in place. Those are the people resources. You may need physical space resources. You may want to sit together as a team. You may need skills. You may need someone in the organization who has done that before. So for example, in one of my previous organizations, when I was with Standard Chartered globally set up a new unit called cash management. And by chance, they hired someone from Citi, which was a leader in cash management, to head up the cash management at Standard Chartered. He looked across the organization and said, has anyone done this before? So I had, and a few others had, and therefore we were asked to join that unit because we had prior experience. So even in your own organizations, if you did a scan, you may find someone who's done this before in some shape or form. So good to pull them into the program because they have prior experience and understanding. They're not starting from zero. And that could be a good thing to do. So you'll need people resources, facilities, you'll need others who have to support it directly or indirectly. You may need money. You'll need a budget probably. You may need some meetings, some discussion, some training, some consulting. Later, once you know what you need, if your BCM is deficient, you may need some infrastructure at some later stage. So you can't budget for that now because you don't know what you need. But later you may actually need much more. So at least what you need at this stage is resources to be able to conduct the program management, not resources to put each and everything in place, but resources to be able to conduct the full exercise. And as you conduct those steps, you may need different resources, which we will budget for later. So you get full sanction from the organization to do that, whoever is needed. And then there are 6 key steps. Establishing policy. That's a good thing as a first key step. So sometimes I started my business country journey with Dr. Go in Singapore. So he's kind of my guru who taught me a lot of things. And one thing he said is the first thing we do is establish a policy. So by means of a policy, what you're really doing is you're telling everyone in the organization what you expect. So that's a good first step. And who issues the policy? Typically, again, it could be signed by the board. Many times it is. Sometimes at the CEO, sometimes at the sponsor. But the higher the level, the more the seriousness. So if your board is willing to attach their name, great. And let me rephrase that statement. Whether your board is willing or not, if you need the board to attach their name to the statement and endorse it because you feel it will give you more seriousness, then please feel free to ask. The board has a right to push back, but you have a right to ask. And if you believed in it strongly, I'd say at least ask a second time, maybe not a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. You may get beaten up, but nothing wrong to say at least a second time, guys, would you mind just rethinking this? Because I just think that if you as a board were willing to sign this or put your name on it or send out the message in your name to everyone about the criticality, then people will take it much seriously. So that's a good first step to start with, creating a policy. Scope. Now, actually, when I started to put together this presentation, I changed this kind of up and down. So actually, I started with scope and then went into policy for the very simple reason that actually, when you issue a policy, normally it even contains the scope. So scope at least is an element of the policy. And the scope is very critical in terms of being able to know what you need. So what do we mean by scope? And of course, we'd spend a bit more time on each one of these in a slightly more detail. But what do we mean by scope? The coverage. And I used the example earlier of the party. So you're having a big party being organized 1 month from now. What's the scope of it? What does it cover? Are you inviting just your guests in and around the city? Are you inviting them from across the country? Are you inviting great friends who are overseas? How large do you intend for the thing to be? So these are important questions. How much food is to be cooked? Maybe what preferences need to be kept in mind? Perhaps what's the weather? What woolens and clothing do they need? Is it a beach? Is it the hills and the mountains? Is it a destination event? You need to know all of those to be clear on the next steps. And importantly, the budget and the timelines and what's required. You may feel if it's a very big event, 1 month is just too short. Perhaps you need more time. So determining scope of the BCM program is very important. As I said, practically it's step A, maybe even before you get into other things. And that then helps you understand, make sure that everyone's on the same page. And therefore, we all have the same context and vision in our mind. And therefore, anything that we're doing keeps in mind the size and scale of the event and the particular players in the event. So hopefully we can be much, much more correct about the decisions that we take going along. Okay. Governance. Great, we've done this, but do we just, once everything's approved, just meet the kind of team? And who owns ultimately, who's responsible for the BCM initiative? Management. But that's what each and every standard will tell you. That's the logical thing to do. Now, what's defined by management? That's a bit of a vague definition. Whose management? Is it just the CEO? Is it the board, which often includes the CEO? Is it a particular committee? Often we may call it a steering committee. Whose management? And ultimately, they need to be happy with what you built, right? So going back to the example of the party, you do all of this and the boss is not happy. Maybe it's an anniversary. The two people whose anniversary it is, they are not happy. Or their parents are not happy that they really care about. I mean, then what's the point? We've done all of this effort and got it wrong. Such a waste. So who is management? Who's governing? Who needs to be happy? Who needs to approve the decisions? Who needs to be comfortable? Good to agree that, to be very clear. What's the process? Do we go to them for each and every small thing? Saying, should I order yellow flowers or red flowers? Or should I offer 10 truckloads or 1 truckload or 2? Do you go to them for each and every small thing? Or do you go to them only for the big decisions? That's an important one. So governance, who should actually approve it? And importantly, when do you keep reviewing it with them? When I speak to my team, I say review maybe at 5%. And 5% is kind of a pilot. that if this went right, then hopefully the rest will go right. After 5, do you review next only at 100%? Or do you still review in between? So maybe 5, 20, 35, 50, 60, 80. And in some ways, perhaps the reviews get shorter because you've covered most of it. The key decisions are taken. But normally you would have a series of reviews. It would not just be perhaps one meeting today and then one meeting literally the day of the event. If something has gone wrong, then literally you've run out of time. You really can't change it. You're stuck. So good to establish the governance in a BCM project. What frequencies do we agree? Who's involved? We'll discuss that. Roles, responsibilities, and authorities, very critical element. Who's empowered to sign off on what? So again, do you go back to the big boss or the CEO or the board for each and every small thing, saying, do you like this CV? Do they need to get into that level of detail yet? Or should you pre-process things and only involve them when it's at their level of expertise and at their level of understanding? Literally, this is the final shortlist. 2 people, we had 20. We didn't bother you with those 20, but these are the final 2. And why don't you take a look? That's perhaps at the level where you would involve them. So agreeing those roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Documentation, critical. Now, if you didn't document it, then what? You've done some great things, but there's no record. And memories fade over time. So if I asked you today what you ate 10 days ago for dinner, I doubt whether you remember. I ask you what you ate today for lunch or breakfast or yesterday dinner, I think there's a good chance you remember. You still may not get it 100% correct actually, but at least you have a chance. So documentation is critical to record decisions taken, to record agreements, to record commitments and timelines, and critically, as you start building a BCM documentation, to actually put down on paper what the management wants and has agreed and has signed off on and must happen. So we'll again come a bit later in this part to documentation, but very critical to ensure that you put in place a solid program. It is comprehensive. It contains all the needed information and a good reason to define this upfront. Because supposing you've done, and we'll come to this obviously in the BIA, supposing you finish your BIA, but actually in that you forgot to ask them their preferred timelines of resumption. Now this is critical. Without timelines, actually your BCM program typically will not work because you need to know what is reasonable from the perspective of your interested parties. So if we did not define that in the documentation, then honestly, you'll just have to rework and your project will fall behind. Extra time, extra effort, frustration, what's the point? So again, very critical to define in advance what the documentation is going to be needed and what those elements are so that we can keep things fully on track and not have to rework and literally do it right the first time. I think that's again a good noble objective in general. And importantly, when BCM really kind of looks at it, and sometimes I use the example when I teach that at the end of the day, yes, we've done all of these things, but supposing you never have an incident, does it mean that the entire BCM preparation is gone waste? Probably not. I think pandemic made it quite clear that you'll perhaps always need your BCM. Supposing you didn't, where does BCM help you? In my way, BCM helps you do more with less. So BCM is, what is a BCM situation? To me, a business continuity situation is when some key resource is unavailable. Some key resource category is hugely unavailable. Largely, it's not just a minor blip. One person didn't come to office today, one minor person who didn't have a major role to play. It's that something is critically wrong. The key people are not there. We're stuck. Maybe if I use the example of the bank where I used to work, typically the bank vault is operated what you call on a dual control system. There are 2 different people who both have to punch in their codes and keys at the same time. And if they don't, one of them is missing, the vault can't open. Now, if I'm a bank and both of those people were not there at the same time and the vault did not open, I can't take out my cash. I can't service my tellers other than maybe some emergency cash, which I may have arranged. So particularly anyone who comes to the bank, we may say, sorry, we don't have cash. Please come later. Not a great situation to be in. Kind of when it comes to documentation per se, good to ensure that everything is defined, everything will work. And in advance itself, we've kept those things in mind so that we do it once and for all at the right time in a very organized manner. And therefore, when it comes to business country, to me, critical element is business country, in my view, helps you do more with less. Something was majorly unavailable and we managed without that. Great, fantastic. But is there a learning there? If I did this as a plan B, then I should even see whether actually I should at some stage substitute my plan A and just keep my plan B. Maybe my plan B is a smarter way to do things. Maybe technology has evolved. There was a traditional method. But when we start putting in place a business country, we realize that there are better ways to do it. So it could well be that business country actually helps you improve your processes, do more with less, bring in more efficiency, and remove non-value add. Perhaps the plan A was doing a lot of things which are not adding value. Plan B says we don't have the time and resources, let's do what's important. And guess what? Nothing critically got left out because many things being done were non-critical anyhow. So I think BCM actually in a long-term sense helps a lot. And by creating the new documentation, you, I believe, should maybe be able to also improve your basic processes and substitute traditional non-value add techniques and methods with even smarter ways of doing things. So BCM could help you not just improve your plan B, but put in place a better plan A. Lastly, great, we've taken a lot of decisions. We've got a lot of sign-offs. Management supports our desired way forward. Is that all we need? No, we need a project plan. We need timelines. We need milestones. We need to block people's diaries. We need to agree which day the steering committee will meet. Is it meeting every week or every month or once every 6 months? How long will it be meeting? Ideally, which day will it meet? Ideally, what time that day it will meet? Is it a 2-hour meeting, 4-hour meeting, full day? Let's block the calendars now itself. If you need to change it close to the date, go ahead and change it. But try to, in fact, lock in things to as large a detail as possible because that's your best chance of success. It's in their diaries. No one can then say, oh, I didn't know. Sorry, I'm not there. Oh, I'm there. I mean, you were told 4 weeks ago. No excuses. So stage F is actually then pretty much putting in place a project plan, getting that project plan approved, knowing what is the start and end date of the various steps and milestones and the entire project, and making sure this is communicated to everyone so that everyone gives it the needed priority. Everyone does what they're supposed to when they're supposed to do it. And then your plan has a good chance of being on track. So high level 6 stages. I think the stages make sense. I hope this is a logical flow. And we'll then get into those 6 stages one by one. But again, I'm just going to pause in case there are any questions. Hit me on the chat line. We've just crossed about an hour. This could be a good time to take a logical break. So I suggest just a 5-minute break. Let's restart in 5 minutes. And in about 5 minutes, I'm going to look at the chat questions and try and address some, if any. If anyone has a question, put it now itself before you take your break. And let's restart. And if there's any feedback about what we've done so far, anything to be done differently, anything not working, again, please let me know so we can course correct as we can. So thanks very much. I'll kind of put it on pause for now from my side. Take a quick break. We may play a small promo video during the break. The fact is, when you see this live on YouTube, the rest of the world keeps doing their own promo. And normally when my session comes on board, there's someone else before me who comes and plays their promo video. So we'll just do ours, but we fully expect that you won't be looking at the screen. You're enjoying your break and doing whatever you need to. But if anyone is there, we'll maybe just play a promo video possibly while we do that, and see you in about 7 minutes from now. Thank you. So we did have some comments and I'll go through them. So Irfan, online resources for training, we can speak later. As I said, I don't want to confuse commercial with non-commercial. This is purely non-commercial. It's done just to try and help out at this point in time. And particularly, I'd say the target audience for this is not seasoned BCM professional. I see many people on this session who could actually teach this course itself. Some very highly regarded BCM professionals, highly capable. The target audience for this that we've set up is actually for those people who need help. Someone who's looking at BCM as a career, someone who really wants to understand more, someone who, and to me, it's more, it was my way of giving back. For example, something I really admired and liked is when ISO actually gave out the 2231 standard as free to read once the pandemic happened, saying, guys, I mean, you need it, so go ahead and use it. But I think the thought came, let's do what we can. Hussain, roles and responsibilities, great, good point. Yes, in governance, I'd say we agree the components and then actually we firm out those roles and responsibilities for each of those elements. So everyone should be told that this is your role, this is what you need to do. Okay. Yes, Hussain, you have commented on the policy. Fair, I'll go ahead. I don't think that's a question, so I won't stop. Durgesh, thank you. So far so good. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Again, from Durgesh, financial impact of an outage. Great point. And actually the BIA, we can do that. So we'll address that in the BIA. In my view, in some industries you can, in some industries you can't. In telecom, in financial services, you can assess the financial impact of an outage. Treasury, for example, trading, you can easily. So let's do it at the BI, but yes, you can. In some you can't. Maybe you're a government department. Difficult, okay, but in some you can certainly. Okay. Rajesh, ROI on BCM implementation. Good question. I'm not going to deal with it here because we have a shortage of time. I want to cover those 6 points. And Suzanne, you had the same point. It's a very valid point. Let's remember that when we talk about program management, the fact is the program has started, right? That means management is keen. Management has passed the stage. So everything that we're discussing is when management has set up a BCM program. That means they're convinced. Your question is very valid, but that question actually comes up before the program starts. So before you even get to these 6 stages of implementing your program and having a BCM head appointed and a steering committee and all of those nice things, and the board saying we want it, very valid, but all those discussions of ROI, etc., I believe happened before that stage. Once you got to this stage, it's taken that we are doing BCM. So very valid question. We can look at it later in review improvement. We can maybe look at it a little bit in BIA, possibly, but I won't spend time on that discussion here in the interest of time. I hope that's fair. I'll take another look if there are any questions, and otherwise we'll start. I'll put off the video for now, and we'll go straight to the voice. Okay, so far so good. Thank you. So moving to the slides now, the 6 stages, and I've covered these at least at a high level. So let's start with the first one, policy. And we've covered already what's a program. So program is the entire steps involved to put in place the initiative to implement BCM. We call that a BCM program. Project management, I would say project management is doing it the first time. And typically the first time it's kind of monitored slightly differently. So what is a project? Project typically is something that has a start date. It has an end date. It has a team that's been mobilized to implement the project. And a good example is the creation of a standard. That's project management. So I mentioned that I was probably the first person outside the UK to be involved as a technical expert in a BCM assessment. That was the BS 25999. This was early 2007, I believe. And the 5th audit in the world was Accenture. For their India operations, Accenture covered about 35,000 people as part of their scope for that certification. I, of course, this is public knowledge. I mean, it is the fact that Accenture went through this. I believe that's not, I obviously cannot talk about the details of the assignment. The point I'm making is that was a project. So for example, the first time we are going through a new standard, the first audit ever in India on business continuity, 25999, and the 5th in the world. So there's no body of knowledge. We are all struggling to figure out what the standard says and the why. So literally in terms of BIA, how's a BIA to be done? How's a BIA? What's the right way? There were 3 members in the team. I was the technical expert. And every day, actually, we'd have a slightly different opinion and a different interpretation. We wrote to the body. We said, okay, guys, you created the standard. And please help us with our interpretation. Is it this or is it this? They said, we don't know. The project team is disbanded. I mean, end of day, who do we ask? So that's an example of a project. The team came for a particular objective. Objective is create a business continuity standard. They did it, standard launched, khalas, now you unwind, you kind of go back to your jobs Thank you very much. A program is different. A program is ongoing. So literally for business continuity, the first time you implement it, it would be a project. But once you've done it the first time, assuming you need to do it periodically, and in business continuity, the general recommendation is at least annually. So at least annually, relook at everything, relook at your policy, relook at the BI, the risk assessment, the plans, and almost kind of rework them as they need, so that this year onwards, they meet your objectives for the next 12 months. They're not just supporting what you did last year, they are supporting what you plan to do this year and in the future. So that's a program. So I think importantly, what we're really saying is you may start as a project, but every year the business continuity program should come along. And that's an example. I mean, there are many things that organizations would do annually. You do budgeting annually, most of you. You do maybe campus hiring annually if you have large intakes of numbers. You do performance appraisals annually. You do salary revisions annually. You set out your the calendar leave dates for the year, official leaves, which are going to be the dates for Eid and Ramadan. Many of those things happen annually. Similarly, a program happens annually. So that's a program done, repeated on a regular basis, and kept intention being to refresh the future, what you're going to do in the next upcoming few months to make it effective. That's why program hybrid is important, because it's looking at the upcoming future, not the past. What is a policy? We covered that briefly just before we were breaking. A policy is a management statement of their expectations. This is what we want. A BCM policy would say, this is what we want in our BCM program. We want this, we want this. So if I were to just maybe do it verbally without looking at this stage at a formal document, as a management team, I would say we are committed to ensure that business continuity is implemented in the organization. I would also have to specify why I want business continuity to be implemented, not just saying it should be done. That's not just enough. So I'd have to say for our organization, business continuity is important because, so let's assume I'm a financial institution. I gave an example earlier of a bank. So why does a bank need business continuity? So if I'm a bank CEO, I would say business continuity is important because the financial industry is very interconnected and people are very sensitive and conscious about their money. We owe it to them to give them the comfort at that all points in time that their money is safe with us. If there was downtime when we are unable to have people access their money, certainly it will create concern. And that concern may not be restricted just to us as an organization. It could actually extend even to other banks and financial organizations. In fact, as a real example, I'm diverging now from my comments on the policy. As a real example, I actually landed in a city at about 1 a.m., going to my hotel, and I see a long line in front of an ATM at 1 a.m. in the morning. Now, why would you have a long line in front of an ATM at 1 a.m. in the morning? Certainly something happened yesterday. Next day, I read in the paper that there was a liquidity concern, a run on another bank in another country. And someone in that country must have told someone, and people said, oh, if that bank has a problem, let me go get my money from my bank, which has nothing to do with it. So banks are very interconnected, and that's a very important reason to do BCM. I owe it not just to my customers, I owe it to all my fellow banks, that because of my disruption, it shouldn't be that I go create a problem for others. But what's in it for me? My reputation. If I don't give out money, then people will stop depositing money with me. They'll say this bank just is bad intentioned, or this bank is bankrupt. They don't have the money. If I give them my money is gone. So eventually you'll have no customers and the bank will close. ATMs. I mean, would you want to deal with a bank where you can't get your money from the ATM? The ATM is constantly down. Would you want to deal with a bank where you need to make an urgent transaction and internet banking is always down? I have a real example of a bank which to date does not have electronic banking. By mistake, I opened an account. Frustrating. I'm now closing the account. I mean, who can live today's date without internet banking, especially even more so in a COVID-19 environment? So in the policy, please specify all reasons why your organization cannot have downtime and the implications of downtime, financial implications, non-financial implications, non-financial reputation, etc., financial implications, fines, penalties. We spoke earlier briefly about treasury. What happens if your trading system is down for, say, about half an hour? Treasury is huge transactions, they're mega bucks, and rates fluctuate. Half an hour earlier, I was getting a great rate. I was down, your system did not allow me to do the transaction. Now the rate has increased 20%. Bank, you pay me, you caused my loss. So there could be real fines, real penalties. Saudi, for example, has, I believe, a regulation that a trading entity cannot be down for more than 45 minutes. Trading in Saudi, I mean, you have to restore within 45 minutes. If you're a class B broker, I believe, and if you're a class A, probably even 30 minutes. So that's pretty stringent. Why? Because otherwise you're letting down your customers. So a good policy must specify what you want, why you want it. The policy should specify how you want it to be done, should mention the committees, the people involved who are given the responsibility and authority to make this happen. You may want to mention the steps involved. We will do a BI, we will do a risk assessment. We will follow the 2231 standard. We will follow the SAMA standard. We will follow the SEMA standard, as the case may be. Governance, reviews, that periodically we should relook at it and see that everything is okay. And I would very strongly suggest you put one statement which I very often do not see in a policy. And I believe in my suggestion, you should actually make a statement in the policy. And by you means you're creating it, but you're not necessarily signing it. Probably the CEO or the board is signing it. The statement I'd like to see there is to say that BCM is the responsibility of each and every operating unit, be it a staff function or a line function. Each unit is responsible for their restart of operations within reasonable timelines in the event of a disruption. Each unit should also do their best to ensure that they minimize the possibilities of a disruption for their operations. And business continuity is therefore the responsibility of each department head. We have a central team. The role of the central team is to assist the departments in putting in place strong and robust business continuity. The central team are the subject matter experts. They are here to guide and help you. But the ownership and responsibility for business continuity is that of each and every unit and their manager. And I would further go on to say that I expect each operating unit to confirm to me, supposing I'm doing it for the first time, as a project for the first time, I may say I would like each and every operating unit to confirm to me in the next 6 months that they have built their business continuity plans as per recognized agreed methodology and that they have conducted their initial level of testing. I may even put in place that deadline and that timeline. What happens if you do this? Suddenly, each unit now is running after the BCM head so that the BCM head can help them and they can quickly get their job done and keep the boss happy. And if you don't write that, each unit ignores the requests of the BCM head and everything else to help put in place BCM. So I think this one statement can actually totally change the thing on its head and make sure that each operating department accepts its own responsibility rather than dumping everything on the BCM team. That's my suggestion. Okay. So in policy, we are stating what we need, we being management, why they need it, how it's to be done. So moving forward to the next slide, I hope this is covered. Scope, what do we mean by scope? Coverage. What's in, what's out. We will do BCM in this area, we will not do BCM in this area. So that's what scope means. And an example that I give in my lessons and my courses and the consulting that we do. Let's take a really large airline, and let me take Emirates simply because I admire it. It's a fantastic airline. Let's say you have to implement business continuity in Emirates Airlines. Now, I think Emirates Airlines has decent BCM already, but let's assume you're doing it for the first time. Emirates probably operates in about 100 countries. I'm just guessing that number worldwide. So what does it take to implement BCM in this worldwide, I would say, kind of map or location across the world? Easy to do. How long would it take? So throw me a number. And in the interest of time, I may not wait for your response. But literally, if you had to implement good BCM in each and every location in the 100 locations across the world. And that's just the countries. In each country, they may have multiple locations. They could have an airport, a terminal office, city office, cargo, freight, etc. How long? I'm just throwing you a number. I'd say 5 years. I could be wrong. I could be right. So let's say you start this 5-year program. What do you think are your chances of success and things going very, very well? Almost certainly people will lose interest. We're going to say this is too long, waste of time, effort, and kind of while you're doing it, things change and you're back to square one. So generally keeping a large scope is not a good idea. If you would do this, I would say choose a small hub and spoke kind of thing. Maybe some organizations start only with the head office. Because that's the nerve center. That's where the big decisions are taken. That's kind of where even a crisis has to be managed from. So that could be perhaps one small scope or slightly wider. Let's take a city. In that city, let's do everything. Let's do the city office. Let's do cargo, everything. So that could be a small pilot that we've done one of everything. We'll expand it further to others. Let's take a region. We can take those decisions, but critically take a manageable scope. And my suggestion would be take a scope that you can do in approximately 6 months, maybe maximum 6 to 8 months, but ideally within a year, certainly. I think that gives you an adequate ability to demonstrate progress, to do a good job, to complete it, and to do it well. And once you've done that, then there's a lot that you can do with success, demonstrated success behind you. But if you take on something too large, too bite, to chew, then literally you will fail. And if you fail, the whole project goes for a 6. And of course, it's not a great feeling for you also. So scope is important. Scope helps actually, manageable scope helps keep things tight, on track, and be able to get you success. Exclusions, there will be exclusions. Whatever is excluded is not part of the BCM project. Therefore, someone else needs to deal with it. Who? Let the department head deal with it. Let maybe senior management deal with it. So it's good to say for anything that's not in this, so and so is the right person. Good to define that so that there's absolute lack of lack of confusion, total clarity. If you're in scope, I go to so and so. If I'm not in scope, I go to so and so. Outsourced activities, anything that is done by the organization which is involved in the service delivery is included. It really doesn't matter whether it's being done in-house or outside. If it's a critical part of your process that without that your process will stop, then it has to be included. So in the policy, I would also include a very important statement, which often I don't find. In the policy, I would also include a statement that the scope of our BCM program also includes all outsourced activities which are part of providing us our urgent and time-sensitive products and services. And all suppliers to our organization are automatically expected to fully comply to our BCM program. So just make a blanket statement. Now the shoes on the ball is in their court. It's for them to make sure that they are compliant. I would say just make that blanket statement, and then you can go one and figure out which are the critical ones and make sure that they actually are in a position to provide you the service delivery that they need. Which is why, as I said, when I was redoing this, I actually thought that we should start with scope and then actually come to policy, because policy will end up including many elements of the scope. Governance, which teams do we have to put in place? Who's the right level that should approve things? What is to be approved? When is to be approved? How do we keep reviewing? How do we make sure that there are no surprises? If we need to take a do it right the first time approach, when do we review? What do we review? My simple answer, that's what we mean by governance. Governing the project, keeping things on track, ensuring that there is someone keeping their eye on the ball and making sure that things are going the right way, that we are delivering a high quality output, we are delivering a high quality output in time, and therefore there seem to be right now no showstoppers in terms of us completing the project in time and at the right quality. So governance looks at those aspects. How do you do governance? Ideally review. Where should we have been right now? What's been done so far? Where are we? Are we on track? Not on track? If you're not on track, why? What do we need to change? What do we need to rework? Maybe redo the plans. How do we ensure that we get back on track? And maybe we decide a new track. Okay, bad idea, a good learning here that we should not do this. Okay, let's incorporate the new learning. Let's change the plan. But critically, we now have a new plan that we are now committed to. So it's a good process to make sure that at a frequent basis, we can keep validating that things are okay, keep getting decisions that maybe are stuck, ensure that we don't lose time, and ensure that there is no rework at all. That's the intention of governance. Typically, it's by committees. So who has to approve, who wants to be involved? If the board wants to be involved and wants to know what's happening, great. I mean, let's get the board to keep convening. They may need to convene frequently, because if they convene typically once in 3 months, that may be too late. So that's their call. Often it may be a dedicated smaller team within the organization, like a steering committee. So at what level of what frequency does the steering committee meet? Say once in 2 weeks, once a month. And in that sense, and then who are the other people who actually have to play a role in the process? So governance is more the people taking the decisions and the approvals, and who tell you what's not okay, what's okay, what to change. Critically, roles, responsibilities, and authorities, which are the various entities who need to play a role, including the governance people. So the first level in this, number one, in part D, assigning roles and responsibilities, the first level would be the steering committee itself, top management sponsor steering committee. We've spoken of top management, excuse me, typically that's defined as the people who take decisions in the organization, the people who run the organization. Sponsor is normally the top management representative for the BCM initiative. So is all the senior management equally responsible, equally spending the time? May not be an efficient way to do it. Usually one person is nominated and saying, you are the sponsor. You should spend more time on BCM than the others. And you can then refer it to others and for us, for our approval. So we don't need to get into the level of detail. You get into the level of detail. That's your core responsibility. So normally the sponsor is a senior management representative, someone who knows the CEO well, who can walk into the CEO's office anytime there's an urgent decision or something needed or a showstopper or the project is falling behind. The sponsor has the confidence and comfort that he can walk into the CEO's office and get a quick decision, because normally the BCM head may not be able to do that. So good to nominate a sponsor. Sponsor is normally the head of the steering committee, and sponsor is the one the BCM head goes to when he or she is facing a problem. Top management is generic, could be the board, could be the CEO, whoever in the organization has to approve decisions. And using the party example, they are the ones who have to be happy when the BCM is built. So if you do all of this and top management is unhappy, then maybe technically the project worked, but it's a failed project because your stakeholders are upset. What's the point? So it's good to keep them in line, on track, in the loop constantly. BCM head and team. Yes, normally you will have a BCM head. Could be full-time or part-time. Doesn't necessarily mean he has to be full-time. Depends on the size of the organization. But in general, many entities, and especially larger ones, put in place a full-time head. The full-time head may often need some people to support them. So the BCM team. Why? To coordinate mostly, to run around, to follow up on open issues. And there'll be many open issues. And very simply, if for example, you have to submit a BIA to the steering committee for approval, consolidation, and 10 units have sent their inputs, but the 11th has not, then you're stuck. You can't consolidate because one input is missing. So someone needs to chase them, go sit with them, etc. So there's a lot of chasing and follow-up, and that's why normally the BCM head may need a team along with him. Department reps, coordinators. You can't do everything. You don't know everything. You don't understand everything, and you're not expected to understand everything as a BCM head. Goes back to my statement at the beginning. The role of the BCM head is to make the project happen. The role of the BCM head and his team is not to do everything for everyone. That's the role of everyone else, and hopefully your policy has specified that. I need every unit to own their BCM and do what's necessary to put in place. If you need help, contact the BCM team. Their job is to help you do it and to advise you and to guide you. But their job is not to sit down and do everything for you. So it's best done by putting coordinators and representatives, and they are, for the BCM team, they represent the department. For the department, they represent the needs and expectations of the BCM team. Critical role. That's why, as I said in the beginning, we normally ask when we do our consulting, we say, give us your best person for the BCM initiative. Someone who knows it all, someone who can do it all, someone who others will listen to. If he tells his department people that, look, I need this by tomorrow, then he's senior and respected enough for them to do it for him, either due to their official relationship or even due to their personal relationship. But he is a person who you can rely on to get the job done in time at high quality. Once the plans are ready, you may need to know who will actually implement them. So who will be the responders, the recovery personnel. Strictly speaking, you don't need this yet. You may need this a bit later, a few months down the road, but ultimately it will need to be defined. And there could be specialized roles, for example, disaster recovery, the IT part, audit, communications. Many of these are quite specialized, maybe procurement in terms of a supplier outsourcing contracts and the BCM element there. So all of these would need to know that we have an initiative, and all personnel, everyone. Okay. As someone who doesn't have a direct role, 1 to 5, I am in category 6, I don't have a direct role to play. Do I still need to know that there is something called business continuity? Yes, I need to know. What is BCM? Why it adds value? I need to know. Why? Because you want me to fully support it with my heart and soul, not just because I was told to do it, not lip service. So it's good for me to understand. So I need the understanding, I need the embedding. What do you expect me to do in a real situation if I don't have a real role to play? At the very minimum, I should be your eyes and ears. At the very minimum, I should come and say, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you think about it? Maybe I should come and say, look, there's this briefcase sitting out there, which in the reception for 3 hours. And I mean, is there a bomb in it? I should know who to tell. Maybe there's a particular disruption that's happening or about to happen, which has come to my notice. Who do I inform? So even if I don't have a direct role to play, I still have a role in terms of supporting your BCMS, evacuation, call tree, assembly point, reporting to my manager, keeping in touch. There are many things that you need me to know, even if I'm category 6. So these are some of the critical roles and what is expected of them in a BCM situation. We have about 20 minutes to go, so I look to wind up the rest in about 5 minutes, and then we'll keep a bit of time for questions. So hit me with any questions if you like. Documentation comprises framework documents, evidence of intent, and records evidence of effectiveness. What are framework documents? Framework documents are documents where you tell me what is expected. So we may call it the skeleton. It's the skeleton. This is how we will conduct the BIA. The BCM policy is a framework document. The roles and responsibilities, interested parties, my plan template. These are all examples of framework documents. What my plan comprises, what are the headings, what has to go there. A BCM manual would be a framework document. Roles and responsibilities, who has to do what, the committee members, all of these are framework documents. They help you be clear as to what is intended to be done once the BCM is built. And then you have records. Example of a record, exercise record. This is the exercise that we conducted on this date. This is what was done. This is who was involved. These are the timelines. This is the scenario that we played. These are the steps involved. This is what happened during the exercise. These are our observations. These are our learnings. This is how we intend to incorporate the learnings to improve our effectiveness and be better next time. So any improvement opportunities, anything not great to be improved, yes, let's be aware, let's fix it, let's do better next time. Supposing the exercise went fantastic, wonderful, excellent, 100 on 100. Does it mean we can't approve it? We can still improve it. We can raise the bar next time. We can target more. We can do it end to end. We can do it for longer. We can throw in more complexity. Even something perfect in a small scope can be improved. And of course, if it wasn't perfect, direct improvement opportunities. But good to make sure that we record that, we keep the evidence, and it's good for us to know that we've improved. It's good for you to be able to show the management how we improved. And it's good for your external auditors, financial auditors, others to know that this is important to you. Ultimately, BCM is a part of corporate governance, management responsibility. That management cares and they are doing everything possible to ensure that this continues at a high level, at the best possible level. Key documentation principles. You'd already have them in your organization. I think most of you in your organization would have some strong principles in place. Typical ISO 9000 kind of principles, legibility of the documentation, currency of the documentation should not be very old, should be updated ideally within the last 1 year. Keep obsolete versions separate in a different area so that they don't get by mistake picked up. Standard kind of very common sense principles, very often available in a basic ISO 9000 kind of approach and methodology. So good to have key principles in place. And if you look at documentation, I bring through the 3 information security requirements: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So integrity, the contents of the documentation should be reliable and correct, so you can rely on it. It's a correct document. Confidentiality should be only available to people who need it, like phone numbers and email IDs and maybe dates of birth and confidential information like that. No need for it to be available with someone else. And availability, when you need it, it should be available. There's no point having it, but when you need it, it's not there. That's one reason why increasingly plans are on handhelds, on the cloud, available on your mobile, maybe even more different technologies, apps, things like that. So in that sense, when you need to know what has to be done, a checklist, a form, it's instantly available and you don't lose time. So that's critical in terms of documentation. So we're coming to the last part, about 16 minutes left. So again, put in any questions if you like. I'm looking to wind up the session at least in the next 5 minutes or so. What more is needed to plan the implementation? Budget, timelines, nominating teams, availability, project progress, corrective action. So let's say we've agreed the elements of the initiative. If I go back to the party, we've agreed the various elements that have to be brought together. Many of them can be built on their own. And towards the end, we kind of assemble them collectively. So it becomes one combined, smoothly functioning initiative end to end. But let's agree the budget. Let's make sure we have the funds and the authority. We know how many funds are there, so we don't overspend, or we don't spend something wrong too much on one stage and then be left with nothing left for the rest. So let's be clear on what we need and get the budget approved. And if there are budget challenges, then we need to readjust our project plan. Maybe agree what is to be dropped, because you can't perhaps do the same amount if you don't have the needed funds. Timelines, end-to-end, and milestones, including milestones for review and sign-off. Sign-off is a very critical process in a BCM program. So let's say if I don't have sign-off, then how do I even know that the organization is committed to what has been agreed? It can change tomorrow. They can say, no, don't do this, don't do that. But I've already done this, I proceeded, but we didn't approve it. Why did you go ahead? So you lose time, you lose effort. It's frustrating. You have to go back and redo things. And it's double work. What's the point? So quite critically, it's important to get sign off before going to the next stage. It makes you comfortable that everyone, all who need to agree and support it, have done so. You have their written approval. And later, if they change, now it's their problem and not yours. Because they gave you the okay, you move forward and then they change their mind. No issues. If you need to change even after moving forward, then there must be a good reason. Option A, you say, no, I'm not changing. Option B, we agree to change. If something should be changed, better change it now than later. So it's not a bad thing at all. But if you have your sign off, then they are responsible for the delay. They are responsible for the rework, and kind of you did all the right things. So no one can blame you. And it's up to them to find the money and the extra time. But if you did not get sign off and you move forward, now you're in hot water because you over exceeded your authority. You were not allowed to go to the next stage. You did it. And you now need to explain. And it's obviously not a nice situation to be in. So very critical to get sign off in my view. And that also comes to the planning process, the committees. Let's assume you have your steering committee meeting every 2 months and they are the sign off authority. What happens if you don't have the papers ready in time for them to sign off? You miss the date. Okay, date's gone. When do you next get your sign off? Next meeting. When's the next meeting? 2 months later. So what happens is, due to lack of planning, you just lost 2 months. So not a great thing to do. That's why it's important to come up with this project plan. Who has to approve? When will they be able to give you the approval? When do they meet? And make sure your papers are with them, say 2-3 days in advance. So and speak to the secretary of that committee to make sure that your papers are in, and maybe get an early slot, not the last slot for the day that they run out of time, they overran on something else and your matter didn't come up at all. So be smart, use your charm, and make sure that whatever happens, your BCM initiative gets through on track. If something else fails or falls behind, that's not your problem. So as part of the planning process of implementing the project, budget timelines, the teams, as I mentioned, good to maybe give them a personal letter so that they take it seriously. We had a customer that wrote to about 300 suppliers and said, we are implementing business continuity. You need to be part of it. You need to fully support it. We expect you to meet our full standards. Otherwise, we will not be able to deal with you on a long-term basis. So that's a strong message to give. And interestingly, many of those suppliers rose to the occasion and submitted some pretty decent plans in some time. So good to put all of that in place. Anything and everything that you need to ensure the success of your project, it's good to think of it now and get approvals and activate it at this stage. Let's monitor project progress through those periodic meetings and block their diaries. So block them now itself. Every second Tuesday of the month, 2 to 4 p.m. Lock them in now. So no excuses at that time. Oh, I didn't know, I'm not there, I can't do this. So you knew. Okay. And if anything needs to be corrected as a result of those meetings and discussions, then let's correct it. So a good time to fix anything so that it doesn't blow up later. With that, we've covered the 6 steps. Just a quick recap of the 6 steps. And I don't note any more questions so far. So either I've been crystal clear, or you all knew this, either case, or perhaps you're doing other things at the same time. I hope not. But happy to take any questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Also happy to take any feedback about how this session has gone. So if we need to do any course corrections or anything differently for the next session, we do that. Next time, I'll also try to make sure that we show you some formats. So maybe let's take you through a policy. Let's take you through a scope statement, maybe some roles and responsibilities. So we can try and add some depth next time, because it's a slightly shorter agenda. Embedding is not a topic that would take 2 hours. So we can add some more documents to give you a flavor of the depth to support some of the thought process that we covered today. So I'll stop for a moment. Thank you. So question from Sivakumar. Thanks, Siva. I'll just read it out. Does budgeting include the investment of recovery infrastructure? Great point. My answer, Shiva, is no, it doesn't. And the reason I'm saying that is because I believe you may not have an understanding in very specific terms as to what recovery infrastructure is needed. So let's say you approach management and you say, I need $2 million because I need to put in place my infrastructure. I need a recovery site of 100 seats. And he may say, why 2 million? I mean, buy 100 seats. So why don't you manage in 85? The answer is, at this clue, you don't have any idea at all of how many seats you need. So essentially, you just don't have the information of what you need. I don't believe you'll have the information of how much it will cost. You may not have an idea of any alternatives. So if you try to budget for that at this stage, I think you'll just get beaten up and they'll throw you out and say, come back when you are clear, because at this stage you aren't. So my suggestion, at this stage, only at least secure the resources for the project team to operate and deliver their activities of keeping the project on track. And at this stage, I would say don't try to budget for recovery infrastructure or resources needed to put in place the solutions. Typically, that's done in module 4, design, because that's when you know what's needed, and that's when you know what you have and what you don't have. And then accordingly, depending on what you have and what you don't have and the gap of what's required, you can then figure out what the capacity is, what the investment is. It's outsourced, it's leased, it's bought, various different decisions that you may take at that point in time. And remember, that stage will come again 2-3 months later. By that time, things may change. So really, why secure that budget now? Because you don't need it yet. So my suggestion is do that later when you have a better understanding. I hope that answers your question. Pankit, no, you won't get a copy of the deck. Basically, you kind of been through the session. We may see whether we can provide the recording on a selective basis, but again, that may not happen. Rajesh, okay, so so yes, you're right that teams tend to find it optional, but I think, Rajesh, that pandemic has hugely addressed that issue. I think pandemic has made it very, very clear that BCM is needed. So I don't think the optional thing is there anymore. But my concern is still they think it's your problem and not their problem. And I believe that will get changed only when management makes a clear statement to head of departments that BCM is your issue. Don't expect the BCM to deal with it. They're only there to help you. If you don't want to put your BCM in place, don't expect them to do so. I think when that strong message goes out, management, all departments will take it more seriously and as their responsibility and not yours. Thank you, Balaji. Crystal clear. Thanks a lot. I've been doing this for many years, and I too once was a learner, but I think if you do things long enough, hopefully you keep improving. Thanks very much. Hussain, thank you so much. Glad to hear. This was kind of, again, as I said, an experiment doing it for the first time, but comments seem good. So I'm glad that I spent my time. I thank you all for your time. If there was no one on this session, we'd have cancelled it. So thanks very much. I'm glad. Yes, Pankit, the deck will be helpful. I think as I think about it, we'll send you the deck, not an issue. Irfan, policy, I would say that takes us into the realm of consulting that we do separately. That's a paid service. So you can engage with the team separately. You have the numbers, and I would say this is more mass learning, which to me is 12 hours of delivery and about 12 hours of preparation of keeping things ready between me and the team. So it's quite an effort. So we won't provide more than what we can service, but of course we do a lot of things otherwise. And if you were to apply for them, any of them, we'd be delighted. But that's not why we are doing this. I would say that's a welcome byproduct. Siva, okay, practical challenge of implementing. Good point. I think I've done some, but let me keep that in mind. And as we do the other sessions, we'll try to also handle that. Very valid point. Thanks. Ashish, thank you. Thanks very much. Sounds good. Links and references, Irfan, not now. We can try and cover it in the last session as a recap. Not committing, but let me keep in mind. So there are two things to be kept in mind. One is practical examples ongoing and links, etc. Thank you. Thanks, Rajesh. Irfan, CBCI, contact the team separately. I think what FQ offers is a good option. Probably they can help you. And as I said, mostly about 50% to take the FQA course, they pass with merit, which is above 85%. So they do pretty well. And FQA, in fact, offers you about a mock exam, full mock exam of 120 questions with explanation, live administered. I think that makes a big difference. So contact the team. Thank you, Asma. Appreciate. Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you, Samrat. Thanks, Asma. Hisham, what is your inquiry? So put your inquiry in again. Hisham, we have 2 minutes. So I have time to address it if you put it right away. So Hisham, time is ticking away. I have only 1 minute more. Thanks, Nisha. Appreciate. No, you won't get the recording, Nisha, but you will get the slides. And I need to clean up the slide. There were some typos. I did it in a bit of a hurry. So I'll actually clean up the slide. So Hisham, gone. 1 minute left. You've said you missed my above inquiry request, Hisham. So you need to tell me your inquiry request. 1 minute going, and I think almost up. Thank you, Sharad. Thank you, Shahjit. Thanks, Shusha. I'm still going to wait 1 minute more for Hisham's question. Practical case, not clear what you're mentioning, Hisham, but no, in about 2 hours, we may not do a case study. I think this is more knowledge dissemination. So if it's a case study you're looking for, then I think you need to contact the team separately. And that may be a paid session, but I would say this is more knowledge dissemination. Thanks, Prasad, Srini, etc. And again, also, please do subscribe so that the notification can come to you next time. Thanks so much. So we are bang on time. With that, I'm going to call this session to an end. And thanks very much. You made it worth it for me. So I'm really glad I did this. Take care. Have a good day. God bless. Bye-bye.